Public hearing one is a revocation hearing scheduled this day pursuant to state law to revoke a conditional use permit previously granted to DRLM Enterprises DBA Culture on May 8, 2018 by ordinance number 47217, authorizing the operation of a nightclub on property located at 814 Granby Street. This matter was passed by at the December 7th, 2021 meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Clerk. Tonight, we have a public hearing on PH1. Before we get started, Mr. Fishko, or do you have anything before we get started? Are we ready to proceed?
Yes, we are ready to proceed, Mr. Mayor, and when it comes to the vote, if we could have a vote on whether we're proceeding with the original ordinance or, as I discussed, amending with you, that would provide a pathway forward for the operation of a restaurant up until 12 o'clock. So if we could make that decision before the vote is taken, the clerk will know which ordinance to read first.
Okay, thank you. So the public hearing is to determine whether a conditional use permit should be revoked pursuant to ordinance number 38746. The procedure for these hearings will be as follows. The city attorney will present oral argument why the conditional use permit should be terminated. The entire presentation shall last no longer than 15 minutes. The holder of the conditional use permit will present oral argument on their case, which shall last no longer than 20 minutes. The city attorney should have 5 minutes for rebuttal. Then the council will consider whether or not the conditional use permit shall be revoked. There's no public comment during this procedure. Ms. Taylor.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. City Manager. The City of Norfolk has the power to regulate land use, and that's what brings this hearing before Council this evening. It's a motion proposing the revocation of the conditional use permit held by DRLM Enterprises. The city granted that conditional use permit to DRLM Enterprises doing business as Culture in 2018, and the city reserves the power to revoke that conditional use permit if it finds that that is necessary to meet the conditions that it reviews when granting a conditional use permit. It's really an agreement between the city and the holder, a special use from the city to the holder to have its proposed use that will not cause a negative cumulative effect on the neighborhood and the city as a whole. The conditional use process engages the neighborhood and surrounding community in order to avoid issues and any negative effects. Council granted this conditional use permit in 2018 over some objection from some neighboring businesses and residents, but with a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission after hearing from the City Planning Department. In that application and recommendation, with the unanimous vote to approve it, Planning advised that a nightclub in that location would not have a negative impact on the surrounding area if it was subject to the conditions of a conditional use permit. And that permit is not just about what goes on behind the doors in a business, but what goes on outside those doors. The permit refers to this. It regulates the sale of off-premises alcohol for consumption. It regulates waste storage, that it be outside of public view and out of the right-of-way. It regulates that all exterior areas must be maintained in a clean and orderly fashion. It regulates seating indoors and out. It states that during all hours of operation, the operator is responsible for maintaining the sidewalk and parking lot adjacent to the premises to keep the area free of litter, refuse, and waste. It addresses the queuing of a line to enter a business to ensure that the surrounding properties are not impacted. These are all important conditions that are addressed in the conditional use permit because they affect the surrounding neighborhood and community. It also incorporates and requires a security plan. Culture, in its own security plan submitted at the time that conditional use permit was granted, acknowledges that the purpose of security is to take preemptive measure to guard against crime, to create a safe environment for patrons, including when they're arriving and departing, to mitigate noise and inappropriate conduct by patrons exiting and entering, to ensure the quiet enjoyment of immediate neighbors and particularly residents when in a mixed use area, including apartment buildings. It acknowledges that the purpose of security is to protect and promote the courteous, inviting, and hospitable character of the neighborhood and the city of Norfolk generally. That plan states that Culture Security would not only work at the front door of Culture, but patrol neighboring lots for the safety of patrons and staff. Given the content of that conditional use permit, its incorporated security plan, the owners of Culture are aware that their responsibility as business owners does not stop at the door out of their nightclub. However, the interactions with their neighbors and the recent statements in the media from the owners and by council demonstrate that in fact the owners do not take responsibility or accountability for what goes on outside their door. Assuming it to be true that Culture cannot be held responsible for what goes on outside, which the city does not concede, then the responsible land use decision would be to revoke the conditional use permit. By their logic, if even the best management in the world would not be able to stop what goes on outside, people engaging in shootouts after leaving Culture with Culture's security team, then the city must not allow it to operate. All remedial action in the world would not make this location any less inviting to people who want to engage in crimes at that spot. This activity does not happen outside of other establishments, outside of every establishment. If management and use is totally irrelevant outside the door of a business, then there'd be uniform distribution of crime in parking lots next to late night businesses that serve alcohol. That's not the case. Management does have something to do with it. To say that they're not responsible for what happens outside of their business is to say they don't care about the community and neighborhood. So what has happened there outside of Culture? Since just September 2020 to September 22nd of 2021, Norfolk Police responded to 154 calls for service, specifically to Culture at 814 Granby Street. 124 of those were to assist security. There were 5 assaults, 8 disorderly conduct and trespass, and 3 additional calls that related back to Culture, including gunshots on August 1st of 2021. In that same time frame, there were 8 incident reports taken at Culture and 14 that related back. At Culture, those include aggravated assault, brandishing a firearm, domestic assault, hit and run, larceny, and vandalism. Those that relate back to Culture include a purse stolen inside of Culture leading to a stolen vehicle, a victim shot while riding in a vehicle after leaving Culture, a victim in the parking lot outside of Culture that was pushed and she hit her head on a parked vehicle. On May 22nd of 2021, gunshots from Culture hit an occupied building and 2 unoccupied vehicles. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt or hurt at all. However, on August 12th of 2021, shots were fired outside in that parking lot right next to Culture. A patron fired at club security and hit unoccupied vehicles and buildings, including the business across the street. This was the final straw, prompting neighbors to reach out to the city. After that incident, the fire marshal also conducted an inspection of Culture. They did find out-of-date fire extinguishers, no permit from the fire marshal, and exit signs not working. All of those were major safety concerns that were addressed with the owners. On December 9th of 2021, part-time officers working at the from the Norfolk Police Department were in front of the nightclub while working for Culture and heard shots from the rear parking lot next to Culture. This was at 11:59 p.m. Patrons from Culture ran in all different directions. The officers recovered 8 to 10 casings from the parking lot. The owners have told neighboring businesses that they cannot control their patrons or employees, including their own private security, that make use of the other businesses' lots and sidewalks. Those businesses are losing clients and losing tenants, and plans to further invest in the area have changed due to the negative events and interactions with Culture. Patrons on the sidewalk drinking alcohol or using private lots are not receptive when they're approached by other business owners in that area asking them to move. The owner of Neon House, the business across the street from Culture, tried to address these issues with the owner, Mike Copeland, directly. She advised that it was not a positive or productive conversation. He told her to leave him alone, told her it was not his concern what people do when they leave his building, that his employee, she didn't want parking in her lot, was a grown man, and if she had a problem with him in her parking lot, to deal with him directly, but that he, the owner, wasn't going to do anything about it. He told her it was not his problem and to not bother him about it again, or they would have serious issues with each other. He told her not to threaten him about going to the police because they can't touch him, because he isn't responsible for what his patrons or employees do. In the last few weeks, the employees at Neon House, when parking in their lot, have found nails. They've suffered 7 flat tires, and to them, it seems not coincidental. When the windows were damaged by the August 12th gunfire, Culture owners paid for the window replacement without telling her. They had just showed up, and to her, it spoke as perhaps some sort of hush money that they didn't want her to have a further issue with them, so the windows were paid for. The Downtown Norfolk Council has tried to work with and make suggestions to the business owners on how to operate as a good neighbor, but to them, the owners and operators have not been responsive. In 2020, Norfolk Police put Culture on their nightly rotation of nightclubs and other late-night businesses to monitor for safety. They've also kept a presence and view at the Harrison Opera House in the parking lot. This, however, did not deter the violence. This consistent need for police assistance or response is a serious consideration for council. Is this the type of appropriate land use for this location? Does it have a negative cumulative effect? Responsibility doesn't stop at your front door when you're a member of a community, a city, a society. And the responsibility the city has to its citizens is to ensure safety and to take action where it can to stop violence. And for those reasons, the matter is before council this evening for a proposed revocation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, members of council. I want you to think about what you would feel like if you were in a process like this. That you walk into a political chamber with a perfectly clean record. No court findings against you. Never been to court in the 3.5 years you've had a business. Never been warned. Never had a meeting. Nothing. Nothing from the city. Nothing from the state ABC. Zero. And instead, with this laundry list of stuff that has been heaped on and blamed on culture, instead of anybody using the 2 different mechanisms to go get a quick proceeding either in court or in ABC, the political route is selected. Because we know under 4.1-225.1, there's a summary suspension available to ABC if they thought that any of this stuff was actually occurring and was the fault of culture. And we know that under 48-17.1, which was a bill carried by former Delegate Terry Suit years ago in Virginia Beach, there was another mechanism that was created to allow a locality quick access to a judge if you actually think there's something going on that needs to be addressed. But you want to know why we're not in either one of those proceedings? Because there is no evidence. And folks, in 30 years of practicing law, I've never seen anything like this. Never. I have represented lots of establishments over the years, and I've never seen one hauled in with not even a warning, not even a meeting. Now, let me tell you what we did when we found out about this. We asked for meetings. We said, look, we don't know what you really want from us. We had an original security plan, then there was a revised security plan, and there was no response to that. There was no request made by police, nobody in the planning department, not the city manager, not the city attorney, nobody. So then we find ourselves in this process and said, well, will you meet with us now? Give us an idea of what you're looking for us to do that's different. We want to talk to you. Refused, ignored, nothing. So then, yesterday we sent some more security details, some other ideas, just out of the blue. Nothing requested. Said, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? We sent it all highlighted in red so that everybody could see what the changes would be. Once again, radio silence. And the first time we hear that there might be anything that might be acceptable is 30 minutes before this is to start, with no opportunity for any kind of thought process to figure out whether or not something makes any sense. But let me tell you what wasn't responded to. No response to everything that has been proposed in the way of safety. And so for any attorney to stand up in front of you and say, culture doesn't care, that is ridiculous. Culture is the only group, these 4 young men right here, they're the ones who have been reaching out to the city saying, please tell us what you're looking for. We don't have guns and badges. We're not in charge of the streets or sidewalks. What do you want us to do? We'll hire anybody you want hired. We'll revise our hours. We'll do anything. Nothing. Radio silence. That's because this is a political process. This is not a legal process. This is all political, and it's all unfair. When you have a process, and there's an ordinance here, not a fan of a political process to take away somebody's conditional use permit, but if you're going to have a process, you have to follow it. So let's see what's in the statement of proposed revocation. It says in the second sentence on page 1, the conditional use permit requires adherence to specific conditions contained therein and also requires compliance with all other applicable laws and ordinances. Well, the rest of this document doesn't identify a single conditional use permit item that has been violated, nor does it violate a law or ordinance that culture has violated. Nothing. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, your own ordinance that explains this process explains that you have to, among other things, identify what the legal principles are that you're using. There's nothing. There's not a case, there's not an ordinance, there's not a statute, and there's not a single paragraph identified in the conditional use permit. Nothing. It's not there. If we were in court, I'd be filing a motion to dismiss. Judge, the pleading doesn't say anything. We're not in court. But I do expect you to at least follow the rules you created. You created the ordinance, you created the process. Follow it. We're entitled to rely on that. Just like you say, well, culture, you got to follow the conditional use permit. We're entitled to say, okay, and follow the rules applicable to this whole process. What does the conditional use permit actually say, by the way? It's got it's either 24 or 25 lettered paragraphs. And these are the things it talks about. The principal use of nightclub, that's what you're applying for. Hours of operation. Seating. It has to do with what happens with your alcoholic beverage privileges if there's a change in ownership, doesn't apply. Entertainment's limited to live bands and explains those rules, not applicable. Talks about the dance floor, the layout, floor plans. What is the second floor going to be like? If you have a line to get in, then you have to keep the sidewalk as clear as you can. It says don't prop doors open. You have to maintain a current active business license. You have to remain current on food and beverage taxes and other kinds of taxes. And unlike some other people you've revoked, that's not an issue here, current on taxes. Let's see, public rights of way, you have to pick up litter and do things like that. Okay, that's not alleged as a violation. Designated driver program, talks about the menu, it talks about having an ABC manager, in-house security, a written security plan, maintaining a binder of all this information. This one, I think, is critically important. It says if you violate any ABC laws, then we can take away your conditional use permit. Well, by implication, if you don't violate any ABC laws and you've never even been warned, then I would suppose that you get to keep your conditional use permit. Nothing in this conditional use permit has been identified as having been violated. Why does that matter? Because I've seen what your revocation documents read like. It always says the same thing. It says in very vague terminology that one or more conditions have been violated. Well, the starting point is to identify what is the one or more conditional aspects that we're talking about. Tell us what the subject is, and we'll respond to it. We don't know. What it does not say in your own ordinance that sets out the procedure is it gets you to make a vague reference to, well, there's bad stuff outside, and we got some statistics where we don't have any comparison statistics for anybody else, and we don't know what's going on down the street or on another block or anything else, but there's some bad stuff going on, and it must have something to do with you. All right, your own procedure doesn't allow that. The law doesn't allow that. Nothing. So where is that coming from? That's not how this process is designed to work. That's not how it could possibly work as a matter of law. I sent you each a package, and it had a lot of information in it about due process. Due process, a fundamental part of that, is to understand what are the standards, and then if there's going to be any chance you're going to lose the ability to do something, whether it's a liberty interest or a property interest or anything else, you have to be given notice of what you've done wrong so that you can then show up and defend yourself, bring forward your evidence. What have they done wrong? And having listened a week ago to the discussion about a different establishment, there was discussion about meetings that occurred and drugs inside and supposed bribery, all kinds of stuff. Totally different situation. Here, we've got none of that. No meetings have occurred. No suggestions have been made. No requests have been made. There's no criminal activity that has occurred. Nothing involves these young men right here. None of them have ever been charged or warned or blamed for a thing. Nothing. So the very first thing that I think is important is to emphasize you've got to follow your own rules, and if we look strictly at what is stated here, there is not a single paragraph of the conditional use permit that has been identified. Ms. Taylor called the conditional use permit an agreement. We agree with that. And if you were going to allege breach of an agreement, then it would be incumbent upon you to say what part got breached. That hasn't been explained or identified. So what else is going on here? I attached in my package of stuff that I sent some examples of other criminal activity that have occurred. There have been shootings in Norfolk. Nobody likes that. Gun violence is terrible. All violence and criminal activity is bad. But why is culture being singled out and blamed when you can't come up with even one example of what culture either did or failed to do that would have caused or allowed any of that activity? Where is the evidence of this? Where's the connection? Where's the cause and effect? This is not, honorable members of council, the way to treat a business like this. You've got a successful black-owned business operating on Granby Street, doing the best it can. And I cannot believe that we're here tonight having this discussion with them at risk of losing this huge investment with no prior discussion, collaboration, warnings, requests, nothing. Now, there was some stuff added in tonight we hadn't heard before about, for example, the alleged discussion with Mike Copeland. Mike Copeland's right here, and he will tell you that didn't happen. And if you want him to stand up here and tell you that didn't happen, he's going to do that. Not true. He didn't tell anybody, not my problem, I'm not going to do that, and you know, I'm impervious to any kind of trouble. It's baloney. I've known Mike Copeland for years. That didn't happen. And once again, if somebody else had a concern about it, there's another way to bring it forward. But somehow work in the system to bring this, totally not appropriate. Now, what kind of support does culture have in the community? A lot. And we have sent to you the online petition that's been signed by over 1,700 people before tonight. We had 1 week to get all this together. Over 1,700 people. We also got hundreds of other signatures on a paper document that was given to all of you. We've also had people who came here, some people in this room who supported culture. Would you please stand? And there were a lot more downstairs who weren't allowed to come up. Culture's got broad support, and you want to know why? Because it's not just a nightclub. I know some people have tried to contact you and have told you they've supported charitable activities, they've supported other businesses, they support individuals. They're available to all kinds of people. They welcome them with open arms. This is not just some, roadhouse rough bar that only cares about making money and doesn't do anything for anybody else. That's not true. But folks, we've got a cultural gun problem out there in this world. We've got a violence problem. But the answer isn't to hammer on our citizens and our businesses. The answer is to work with them. Work with them. Give them a chance. If you ask, they'll do it. They want to work with you and the police. Give them a chance. Have you ever before revoked somebody's conditional use permit with no legal violations, no warnings, no requests, and no meetings? I hope not. And I hope this isn't going to be the first time. But I'm standing here concerned. And I'm concerned because of what the rumor mill is out there about what's coming. And I certainly hope you're going to give them a fair chance. You don't have to do this tonight. What you could do is vote this down and say there's insufficient evidence. In fact, there are insufficient allegations, and there's no evidence. But, culture, we want to have a meeting with you, and we want to see some improvements. And we've looked at what your suggested updates to your security plan is, and we want those, and we want more. But work with them, folks. They deserve that. They've paid their taxes. They're not the city's leaders, and they're not the city's law enforcement department. There's some guys trying to live by what ABC requires, and they've been successful. What's in the Norfolk Code of Ordinances? They've been successful there. What's in the state law? They've done that. Nobody's said otherwise. Nobody's certainly proved otherwise. Nobody's asked anything any different. They've done all the things that they know how to do, and they're willing to do more if you will please communicate with them. And then if that fails, you can bring it back. Or you can go to ABC. Or you can haul them into Norfolk Circuit Court, and there can be a hearing. I do know, and I've got less than 5 minutes left, I do know that Mike Copeland wants to speak to you on behalf of the other owners, just to tell you in the last few minutes we've got left how he feels here, because I know in the past you've been disappointed when owners haven't showed up. Well, I've got all four. And Mike's the designated spokesperson, so if you're willing to hear from him, I'll yield and give him the rest of my time. And I'll answer any questions you have now or any other time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr.
Mike,
Copeland.
step right up. And here's your timer. You got till 20.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How y'all doing today?
Good afternoon.
Just to add to what Mr. Martingale has said, us four guys met years ago, probably 15 years ago. We used to work at Bank of America in downtown Norfolk. We all worked together. We went to school together in Norfolk State, all graduates of Norfolk State. I all come from this area. I'm a little emotional because we worked extremely hard. Before this incident, we went to, everyone was scared of her back then. I can't think of her name, Sydney Hall. We went to Sydney Hall, and she had a meeting with us, and she said, y'all the only kind of business that kind of pays taxes, the only one that have a license. Why don't y'all open your own place? You're making other people rich. And it took us like 7 years after that to become something, raise some money, and we went the right way. And we're being looked at as if we're outside shooting. We're outside doing something wrong. We actually, from the ground up, went the right way. We didn't cheat the system. We were managers of a club first. We promoted the club. We put flyers on the cars. And we really did the right thing with parents. We really took all the proper steps. And at this juncture, we're in here as if we're criminals. but looked at it as if we did something wrong. And I never said any of those things to that lady. That lady actually threatened me. That's why I thought it was crazy that she said that. She threatened me on the phone. She said, if we have one more time one of your person's cars out here, we're gonna that's what she told me. She said, we have one more time with your cars out here. It's gonna be. I'm trying to use the exact word she used, but she said one more time or else. And I said, or else? What do you mean or else? I've conversated with you about the cars being parked here. I've asked you to tow the cars. I've made announcements inside my club. Please do not park over there. I've told my security don't park over there. What else would you like me to do but stand over there myself with a sign that says don't park here? And she said, well, if they park here or else, and I said, please, ma'am, at this point, you're threatening me. So I don't want to have any more calls with you because this has obviously turned the wrong direction. So she's lying. And she lied about everything. We met with her after the windows were shot out. We paid the money. Me and him both went over there. We talked with her, sat with her and said what the problem was. We said, look, we're going to pay for the windows. And she made a whole statement her lying. It's not true. We've done everything we can do, and we're still ready to do more. All we're asking is the same opportunity that it seems that everyone else has gotten. Seems that everyone else has gotten a chance or another chance, and then that we're saying another chance, but we're saying another chance for something that we physically did not do, but we'll take responsibility to say we can do more. All right, we'll put police in the back now. There is a criminal problem in not just Norfolk, but Virginia, period. These kids are shooting, and it's sad, and we're the ones that's actually with the community, going to these events, trying to talk these kids out of shooting, trying to stop them. We're donating our own money, we're feeding them, and we're in the same situation as if we're criminals, and we're the ones that's foot on the ground. We're the ones connected to them students. We're the ones meeting with those students. We're the ones taking pictures with them and telling them, look, man, there's other ways for you to become successful. And we're still in here treated just like with everyone else when we really took ground up roots and tried to make this thing happen. Now, we do have other two establishments. We have Cork and Company, which is a restaurant on Granby Street. We also have Canvas, which is a restaurant on Granby Street. But these all started from putting a flyer on a car, working together, having an idea, like, what are we gonna do? We wanna stop working for Bank of America one day. So we put flyers and we threw little events and we, did everything we could do. And now we made it this far.
Sir,
That's all.
your time has ended.
Thank you, no problem.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
First, Mr. Martingale is right. This is a legislative function. We're not in court. A conditional use permit is a privilege, not a right. The city controls its land use. The owners themselves are not on trial here today. No one is saying that they are a criminal. That's not alleged in the statement of proposed revocation. This is a question about land use. And when they own a business that has, in that location, become an attractive nuisance, and he stated there's a big issue with gun violence. And if this is a location that attracts gun violence to a community that has contacted council after suffering from it and stated, we don't want this going on anymore, please take action, who is council to ignore that plead for action? This permit allowing that particular land use is what the council has control over. It would be wonderful if a meeting between the city and business owners could stop gun violence. And there are certain situations where a meeting is appropriate, where court is appropriate. And I've been in court with Mr. Copeland before on conditional use permits for a different business, a different nightclub within the city. And that was having to do with the outside of that business and the maintenance of the parking lot and the landscaping. That was an appropriate action in court, and we were able to resolve it. But to say that the city in this situation has refused, ignored, nothing on this issue is not true. Mr. Martingale says that there was no warning or meeting, and that's correct. When the city gives you a statement of proposed revocation describing gun violence, where yes, not one of those owners is a defendant in a criminal case related to that, but they're simply implicated because they do own a business where there have been 124 calls from 2020 to 21 to assist security with that crowd. Mr. Martingale makes the argument that there is no statistical analysis or context to compare it to other businesses, but there's not a bright line that the city, that council sets in stone that has to be crossed before council can take action. When it hears from its citizens, that's an opportunity to take action. The context here is the surrounding neighbors, the residents, and those businesses that are affected by what is going on there. While over 1,700 people have signed a petition in support, we don't know where they live. Council has heard from those neighboring businesses. Mr. Martingale had provided letters of support from other businesses also in the vicinity on Granby Street, from Zeke's, which closes at 7 p.m., Sanctuary, which closes at 9:30 or 10 p.m., The Exchange, which closes at 8 p.m. at the latest, Commonwealth Tattoo, which closes at 8 p.m., Major Phillies and Norfolk Smoothie. Those are on the other side of Brambleton, and they close at 7 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. respectively. Those aren't the businesses that are open and doing business or have employees there at the same time that those issues arise when a nightclub is closing. Council has heard from those constituents in the statement of revocation, and I believe in the past few days, about what they have seen and what they have experienced and what actions they're taking based on that. Mr. Martingale brings up ABC. ABC can suspend their ABC license, and that would automatically revoke the cup. But ABC, again, that's not Norfolk City Council, that's Virginia ABC. They have different interests, different priorities, different responsibilities to the community. Mr. Martingale says if there's no ABC violations, then that must mean they can keep their cup. Well, this isn't a secondary ABC permit. This is a conditional use permit, a zoning certificate. It's a land use, and the city has the right to control the land use within the city of Norfolk. The city can take action against gun violence through consideration and planning. Crowds that are attracted to a certain type of business that's open at hours late at night, like a nightclub, where there's alcohol, where they may have been drinking elsewhere beforehand, if they don't get into that club because it's at capacity, and they can't be deterred by security, controlled by security, deterred or controlled by the presence of Norfolk Police Department vehicles and officers within view. Thank you.
Ms. Taylor, a couple of questions. Thank you
Yes.
for your presentation. You mentioned in your opening argument that there were over 150 calls to Norfolk Police Department to respond to culture. Is that correct?
Yes, calls for service.
Call for services. And those calls included person leaving culture engaged in shootings,
Yes,
gunshots related back to culture,
yes.
gunshots from culture? I don't quite understand that one.
Yes, it would have been, I believe, a report coming into Norfolk 911 Emergency Services stating that they heard gunshots from culture, I believe meaning in the direction from culture.
And maybe 3 or more assaults
Yes,
and property stolen, purse stolen from inside of the club.
yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, all of these calls or these incidents happened approximately what time of day or night?
And if I can refer to the,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't have that
Okay.
data handy. I may have it and I'll look at that.
Last question. Mr. Martingale referenced that there there is no evidence, would you consider what I just asked to be evidence?
Yes, and as I mentioned in my opening statement, that negative cumulative effect, that goes towards that negative cumulative effect. Under Norfolk zoning ordinance, there are general conditions that are applicable to all conditional use permits considered by council when considering a conditional use permit. There's a number of those conditions, but most importantly, the proposed use must not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various conditional use permits of all types on the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of the conditional use permit on the city as a whole.
Any questions for Ms. Taylor or Mr. Martingale?
I have a quick
Yes,
question,
Mr. Smigiel.
Yes, just to ask further, you said there were 154 calls of service, but then you said 124 to assist security. Can you explain what that means? Does that mean that security at Culture specifically called
Yes.
911 and requested that came actually from security?
Yes, to assist security with crowd control.
So out of 154 calls, 124 came from those that were employed by Culture.
Yes.
That's all.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Martingale or Ms. Taylor? There are no other questions from the council. Any discussion amongst the council? Mr. Pishko, could you explain to all of us what happens if the CUP revocation is upheld? What does it mean for culture in the business?
The CUP is required.
Yes, turn your microphone, Mr. Pishko.
Is that better? The CUP is required for the sale of alcohol past midnight in this location, and it's required for the elements that make it a nightclub-like entertainment. Without the CUP, this property could sell alcohol in a restaurant setting until midnight. But if the CUP is revoked, that by right use cannot occur for 6 months. So that if the CUP is revoked, at least for 6 months, there will be no sale of alcohol or operation of a nightclub at this site. After 6 months, there could be an application for a restaurant at this site.
Mr. Copeland, I have a question for you, sir, if you don't mind, if Mr. Martingale will make you available. You propose some changes in the operation, in the hours and security business model, and to make some significant changes to better operate the club that is compatible with what you want to set out to be. In order for those changes to be made, we don't have the ability to amend a CUP. We would either have to, you would either have to surrender your CUP, and we can work on those changes. But there's no mechanism for us to. We receive, a proposal and some things you want to do, but we don't have that ability to amend a CUP and give it back to you.
Okay.
What Mr. Pishko just laid out is that, if it's voted on tonight and you aren't successful, you will be restricted or prohibited from operating for 6 months. An eating, drinking establishment at that location. Mr. Pishko, is that accurate?
Yes, that is.
Okay. So, sir, I want to just to share that with you, and council, I have no idea how the vote's going to go, but I just want to make sure that you and everyone in this chamber is fully aware that we don't have the ability to amend or fix the CUP and give it back to you.
Okay.
Either you surrender or we take a vote. And I just want to make sure that you just aware of all of that before I call for the vote.
Okay. Yeah, we're aware. Are we able to have any type of recess or anything to discuss that option?
We're here for a couple of more minutes. If you want, I can always call the vote in a minute. If you want to go out into the chamber with your attorney and come back, I will allow that.
Thank you, sir.
All right?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And to be clear, if they were to do something else, what would be the process from tonight forward? How long and what would be required?
That question will be answered by Dr. Filer or Mr. Pishko. That's an administrative.
Maybe specify, take the first stab at that. The ordinance that will be voted upon if the license is surrendered, the business will be allowed an opportunity to apply. And I think that the process should take less than 7 days. So just summarily, the process for operating a restaurant that has to stop selling alcohol by midnight is fairly quick, and the administration has the ability to waive any fees for the application for that. So I would say in less than 7 days, the process will be completed.
So I guess my question is this, legally, is there anything that would stop a member of council from moving to accept surrender of the CUP and immediate approval of continued operation as a restaurant? Because what I was showed on the topic of the effect of a CUP doesn't address what happens if you voluntarily turn it in and you still have in place a by right use and an active ABC permit. So why couldn't there be a motion to accept surrender of the conditional use permit with immediate approval of continued operation as a restaurant? Is there a legal stumbling point?
So, yes, so what I want to be have full transparency with you and with your client, if there is going to be any live entertainment or anything of the sort, that requires a CUP.
We understand that.
If that's,
They have 2 other restaurants that operate as restaurants.
okay.
So, I mean, because I need to have a discussion with them, so.
It's a zoning provision, and the council doesn't have to have the authority tonight to waive the process that will take less than 7 days. The answer to your question is the council cannot legally waive the process.
All right, is there a way that it could be a delayed turning in of the CUP for 1 week so that they could simultaneously apply for the other one and then turn it in on a specified date, which would be 1 week from today? That'd be the 21st. What we don't want to do is shut down for a week and risk turning something in and then not get approved. So if they're going to do something as dramatic as giving up a property right that they currently have, and if I'm going to tell them that makes any sense at all, we need to have some kind of guarantee without a week being shut down. So there could be a motion to allow them to turn it in on December 21st, which is 1 week from now, and in the interim, to make immediate application for whatever needs to be done so that December 21st or the 22nd, they're a restaurant. Is there anything that would stop that? I mean, you can apply for one while you have the other, right?
Mr. Pishko?
It would be within the discretion of this council to establish the termination date. It could be immediate, or it could be in 7 days.
So a delayed process to give them a chance to apply. If we could have a few minutes in the hallway to discuss, we'll come right back.
Sir, and again, if it's going to be a restaurant without any type of entertainment, that's one thing. But if there's going to be any type of entertainment, such as live entertainment or any type of entertainment, that requires a CUP. Just wanted
They
to
know
make sure.
that better than I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right,
We'll step out and be very quick.
thank you, sir. All right. Mr. Pishko, we'll come back to PH1 for the vote, but we will move to PH2.
Public hearing 2 scheduled this day pursuant to state law on the application of Brinshore Development for A zoning from a multifamily neighborhood scale to downtown St. Paul's, and B, a conditional use permit to allow more than 24 dwellings on a portion of the block of property located northwest of the intersection of Mariner Street and Chapel Street, known as Block 9 of the St. Paul's redevelopment. And Planning Commission recommends approval by 6-0.
We have, if, Mr. Muhammad has signed up to speak, and I don't see him. Right. Chamber. All right, Mr. Clerk, I don't see Mr. Michael Muhammad, so we'll call the roll.
I have 2 ordinances, sir. First is an ordinance to rezone a portion of the property addressed as 450 Walk Street, located northwest of the intersection of Mariner Street and Chapel Street, from multifamily neighborhood scale district to downtown St. Paul's district. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance twice and adopt with the effective date. Mrs. Doyle. Aye. Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. McClellan.
Aye.
Ms. Royster. Mr. Smiegel.
Aye.
Mr. Thomas.
Aye.
Dr. Alexander.
Aye.
Second ordinance is an ordinance granting a conditional use permit to authorize multifamily dwellings on a portion of the property addressed as 450 Walk Street, located northwest of the intersection of Mariner Street and Chapel Street. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance twice and adopt with the effective date. Mrs. Doyle. Aye. Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. McClellan.
Aye.
Ms. Royster.
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel.
Aye.
Mr. Thomas.
Aye.
Dr. Alexander.
Aye. Page 3. For page 3,
Page 3.
what, second, Mr. Margiela, are you ready to address the council?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. They are willing to do what we spoke of when I was last standing up here, which is have a motion that would allow them to turn it in a week. So in other words, a delayed turning in of their CUP so they can immediately apply to be an eating and drinking establishment pursuant to the usual rules applicable to restaurants. And that would enable them to know that they're going to be able to go through that process and not be shut down for a week. So if that's acceptable to the council, and I understand it would have to be voted on, then that would be a way that they can live with this process and move forward.
Mr. Pishko, that would require a surrender of the current CUP, and I don't think that requires a vote. That's just,
That's correct. If I understand Mr. Martingale, the CUP is surrendered, and all that remains is for the council to vote on the expedited process. And I think that the surrender is effective 7 days from now. And so that all would remain is to the council to request the manager to expedite the restaurant process.
Right, they are willing to turn it in provided that they can get what we just talked about.
Turn it in immediately,
They're willing to surrender it with its effective date being
7 days from now.
7 days from today, and having an expedited process to get the eating and drinking establishment zoning aspect worked out so that there's no delay.
again, Mr. Pishko, I think that's just the council directing Dr. Fowler and his team and his staff to move in that direction if it's your position that you like to surrender, sir. Is that correct? Okay.
Mayor, Mr. Homewood is here, and he can work through with just what they need to do in order to expedite the other process.
Sir, any discussion from the council on the surrender and the direction of city staff? Ms. Doyle.
Yeah, let's just be clear, so.
Your mic's better.
So will Culture be able to continue to operate as a nightclub for a week?
Yes.
And is there a reason why we can't ask for the surrender tonight and have the process work through for 7 days and have them come back and serve as a restaurant in 7 days once that's done? Because otherwise they're continuing to operate as a nightclub, which is the reason for the discussion tonight.
Yes, what we're talking about is the 7-day period now. Yes, and if the council, if the holder was not agreeable to surrendering it tonight, then the council could revoke it immediately. And we find ourselves in a situation where they couldn't operate a restaurant for 6 months.
That's providing that there are 5 members of council would be voting in that, for that.
Yeah, so just another point of clarification. If Culture was to offer to relinquish their CUP tonight, could they operate as a restaurant tomorrow night, serving alcohol until midnight?
If they surrendered it tonight, it would take several days for them to get the certificates necessary to operate as a restaurant. So it'd be a several-day lag.
Martin, did you have a question?
Would the applicant agree not to stay open past midnight for the next 7 days? I think that takes care of Courtney's issue.
Yeah. So, yeah, if they already have planned events, or, I don't know what you have, sir, I can't, why don't you
They
come,
do.
sir, and tell us what the next 7 days look like for you and your business? Mr. Copeland, will you please come forward and tell us what the next 7 days look like?
We do have events scheduled, and we do have things for the Christmas season, and we do have people that are employed that expect to have Christmas and expect to have gifts for their kids. We do have a lot. That's why we're taking this dramatic turn to accept something that we do not deserve, because we feel like, we'd rather take something to make sure we have employees that are taken care of for the season than to not. So, yes, we do have things scheduled. We asked for 1 week, which is a little ridiculous, to be quite honest, for us to give this up when we have not violated anything. And we're basically just kind of seeing where the tide is turning, and we're trying to work with you, and we're talking about 7 days, man. 7 days out of 3 years we've been here with hardly any, 100 or something calls that actually resulted in 8 incidents, and we have police there. It's not even logical. But we're trying our best here, and you're talking about 7 days, man. Please, 7 days. We're talking about after 3 years of not. It's not like we're not killing anyone. So we're trying our best here, and we're offering an olive branch, obviously, which is a long reach for us to even offer this, but we're offering it. So please, 7 days, man.
Mr. Pitcher, I want to make sure that we're clear. So this is not a vote to revoke, because a vote to revoke, even if it's delayed, a vote to revoke will not allow them to go back in business within 6 months.
Right. I think that perhaps the appropriate motion is whether to continue the revocation hearing and accept their surrender of the CUP in 7 days.
All right, council members, are you clear?
Say that one more time. Please.
The motion is to continue the revocation hearing generally and accept the surrender of the CUP in 7 days.
All right, Mr. Bull.
Yes, the motion on the floor is to continue the revocation hearing generally and to accept the surrender of the CUP in 7 days. Mrs. Doyle.
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan.
Aye.
Ms. Royster.
Aye.
Mr. Smeagol.
Aye.
Mr. Thomas.
Aye.
Dr. Alexander.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. And for just administrative details, should they be in touch with Dr. Filer? or-
And Mr. Homewood's in the
Actually,
back.
reach out to George right now. Yeah, there's a couple documents we'll need, sir, and we can probably process it in a day.
responsibility.